The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports. You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Before we make full-on predictions here, Tyler, I just want to reiterate how awesome this moment is. And you can correct me if I'm wrong or if you've heard different, but I feel like a lot of the fans here in the state of Indiana, they're excited about the matchup of Indiana-Notre Dame, but they're also a little disappointed because one of the teams from our state is going to be eliminated in the very first round rather than both of them having the opportunity to make a run. Have you felt that on your side?
No, I have not. I have not encountered as much overlap between the fan bases. I guess maybe it's my own social media timeline has just become so toxic in the past few days. But it has been pretty funny to see the discourse between Notre Dame fans and Indiana fans. And I'm not going to say that, one fan base has been more hostile towards the other, because I think the loud minority makes everyone look bad regardless of the fan base. Yeah. But I have appreciated how, obviously Curt Cignetti is a very confident guy. And he's very confident in his team. And I think his team is a reflection of that. But I also think the fan base is a reflection of that as well. I don't get the impression at all that Indiana fans are just happy to be here. They think they can win and they think they should win. Do I have that correct?
Absolutely. And whether that, some would say it's a false confidence because, again, it's, Indiana's strength of schedule and they played one tough team and they lost. Whatever. We've dominated so many people, and this team is still good enough to make a run. Win it all? I don't know. There's some really good teams here, but the Hoosiers expect to win this thing. I mean, this is the most historic season in the history of Indiana football. They don't want it to come to an end, and they believe that they can get past Notre Dame, even if it is on the road. And, man, have you seen the ticket prices for this game? It's absurd. It's the most expensive ticket of the first round.
It's actually insane. I will be at the game. Fortunately, I had a friend get me a ticket for face value, so I don't have to basically put a month's rent on this ticket. So grateful for that. But I am interested to hear, what do you think the turnout is going to be? Because I know from the Notre Dame side, they have taken several steps to try to ensure that it is a very pro Notre Dame crowd. The tickets never went to market. Indiana was only given $3,500 to start, and that includes marching band and relatives of the players, the families, all that stuff. But I also know that Indiana and the Hoosier faithful are going to make the trip to South Bend, but getting into the game is a whole different story. So I think it's going to be about 80-20 Notre Dame to Indiana, which would still give you about 16,000 Indiana fans in the game, and they're going to be wearing red and everyone's going to see them. So I think it's going to be a great environment, and I expect to see a whole lot of red this weekend. But inside the stadium, it's like you said, man, it is tough to get in.
Yeah, it is. And that's the feeling I've gotten from my community at Locked On Hoosiers is it's a tough ticket, man. It's hot. And look, it's Christmas time. It's tough to come off that type of money. Totally understand. But Indiana fans are seeing this, maybe not as a once in a lifetime because we expect to be good in the future, but this is the biggest game Indiana football has ever played in. I mean, let's just say it like it is. And so they're going to do anything they can. I think 80-20 is probably about right. Maybe 75-25, but I expect the Notre Dame faithful to show up and be ready to go. It will be a legit road game for Indiana, one that they haven't had to play in all that often. And so it comes down to it. Notre Dame, Indiana, first game of this expanded college football playoff. The entire country will be watching on Friday night on ESPN. I'm jealous that you're going to get to be there. What does Notre Dame have to do to beat Indiana, and do you think they do it?
They have to be able to run the ball. And it's so cliche to say, right? Every game is won in the line of scrimmage, and you got to be able to establish the run. That's true 90% of the time across all levels of football, high school, college, NFL, whatever the case may be. But Notre Dame is going to try and run. And even though Indiana has statistically one of the best rushing defenses in all of college football, they have some real serious players in their front seven. Notre Dame is going to come out early and try to challenge them. And if they are able to lean on them, if they are able to run the ball, which Jeremiah Love, who I believe is, I know this is going to surprise some people because one running back was just in New York for the Heisman Trophy. I think Jeremiah Love is the most talented running back in all of college football, but he hasn't had nearly the same workload as Ashton Genty or even a Cam Scadaboo at Arizona State, but he is electric. Now, he shares the rock with Jarian Price, another very talented running back. And as I talked about earlier, Riley Leonard is going to run a lot in this game as well. So they're going to get creative in their run game. If they are able to run the ball, I think they're going to be able to control the game that way, shorten it up a little bit. So that would be my biggest key. But because if Indiana stops to run and they force Riley Leonard into passing situations, he really has not been forced to pass that much this year. And I don't have as much confidence in his throwing ability, especially in weather like this. So if Indiana is able to stop the run, I'm not sure if Notre Dame is going to be able to pull it out, but I like the Irish to win 28-17. I think it's going to be a close game throughout, and they get a late touchdown to pull away, get the win, and cover that 7.5 point spread. But don't get me wrong here. This is going to be an absolute battle for the entire game.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up the Riley Leonard running situation, because I think that's one of the keys for Indiana is we have to be able to stop him, whether it's a design quarterback run or whether he's just making a play with his legs to extend a play. We've got to be able to keep him contained. And Indiana hasn't gone up against very many running quarterbacks this year, but when they did contain him. I look at Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. That was the situation where everybody was concerned. He's going to run all over Indiana. Can they contain him? Can they stop him? And they did. And so if Indiana can do that and not turn the ball over, talk about cliche and basics. I mean, that goes back to Pee Wee football, Tyler. Don't turn the ball over. Something Indiana did a couple of times against Ohio State. Interceptions, fumbles, bad special teams. Those basic things are what make the difference in a big-time playoff game. So stop Riley Leonard running the ball and don't turn it over. If Curtis Rourke can continue to play at the high level that he did almost all season long, except when he had the thumb injury, and Indiana can get their ground game going too, I think we have a chance. And I think we pull off the upset. We're about a touchdown underdog. I think we keep it close. I think we get a stop defensively and a late field goal, one we haven't had to do very often. We don't kick very many field goals because we've scored so many touchdowns this year. But I think Indiana gets it done. I'm going to say 24-21. Indiana walks out of South Bend and they go to play Georgia in the second round of the playoffs. I hope it's a good game either way, and I think it will be, man. What a special moment this will be Friday night.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. It sounds like we're both on the under. I would suggest anyone betting on this game, that would probably be the safest bet. I just don't really see either one of these defenses giving up a lot of points. I think it's going to be stingy. I think you're going to see a lot of run-heavy stuff early on, try to set the tone. But it's going to be a great night, man. Great game. I can't wait for it.
Tyler Wojak of Locked On Irish, Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. Be sure, if you're watching us on YouTube, to like these videos, give your score predictions down below, subscribe to each one of the shows. And for all of our audio listeners, we appreciate you being there as well. Follow, subscribe, turn on notifications, do whatever you got to do to never miss an episode of Locked On Irish and Locked On Hoosiers. Tyler, thanks so much for your time, my man.
Anytime, man.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
I don't think Penn State's on upset alert against the Mustangs, but if you ask SMU experts, they say otherwise.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Penn State and SMU, let's start with this because everyone around Penn State, whether it's fans or even myself included, think this should be a comfortable win for Penn State. The spread is 8.5. But SMU did not get here by accident. I know they lost the ACC championship game. I don't look at them as that group of five holdover. And Alex, before we got together, we talked about how Kenton is really the expert on SMU here. So I guess Kenton, react to that. Can SMU hypothetically pull off the upset here? What are the chances?
not only can they hypothetically do it, they can realistically do it. I would say that this is a team that is much more well-constructed than many people would imagine. Everybody thought that Rhett Lashley was a madman when he was just stacking offensive and defensive line out of the portal. Like, dude, how many offensive and defensive linemen do you need? Well, do you see the results now? Do you see the results of having one of the most physical, one of the most dominant run games out of a traditionally spread offense that you could possibly see? I'm not saying that this is reminiscent of the Chip Kelly offenses at Oregon, where everything was spread out and you had all these guys and all these motions and all these. It's not that. Rhett Lashley does this in a very, very simple manner. Yeah, we might get in a pistol every now and then, but for the most part, we're going to get in shotgun. We're going to run a little bit of read option with Jennings. We're going to run some power. We're going to make Brashard Smith be our guy, and he's going to do it. Dono can speak to this because if you are a Miami guy, you are de facto an SMU guy because they're known as Miami West now because of how many transfers they got from Miami. But I'm going to tell you, that is a program that in the trenches, they are serious. They are very, very serious. And so the likes of Abdul Carter and company up front for Penn State are going to have to bring their big boy britches for this game because if not only will this end up in a win for SMU, but this will end up in a win in which people are saying, wait a minute, I thought the Big Ten was supposed to be the most physical guys out. I thought this was supposed to be the conference where you could win a game without throwing a forward pass. What happened? Because, again, SMU has the goods in the running game, and Kevin Jennings can be special if you let him break contain. So, they returned the best group of pass catchers in the ACC in terms of production from last year to this year. Everybody said they weren't sure how that was going to pan out. The pass catchers look fine. Preston Stone, their quarterback, was holding them back a little bit earlier in the season. But that is a group that, again, they get it done. And my biggest concern for Penn State, you have to exploit the Achilles heel, which is SMU's secondary. I'm not sure if Drew Allen and company have that in them.
Alex, pick up with that because Miami, you also do Locked On Canes and do an excellent job there. And I agree with Kenton a lot that they have the number 3 run defense in the entire country, allowing teams to only 2.8 yards per carry, or holding teams. I shouldn't even say they allow them. That's a top 3 run defense. And Penn State just had its best ground game performance out of all the teams and out of all the situations in the Big Ten championship against Oregon, which was surprising, but it doesn't get any easier here because, as Kenton mentioned, they have the size and the athleticism to be able to bully other teams.
Yeah, and as Kenton was right to point out, being a Miami guy, I do know quite a bit about the SMU roster because they are littered with Miami transfers. And to give Rhett Lashley credit, he's getting more out of most of these guys than Miami did as far as these players who left. And that includes a couple of the defensive linemen. You mentioned being very good SMU against the run. They also are one of the better sacking teams, top 5 in sacks in the country. And players like Jafari Harvey and Elijah Roberts are huge parts of that up front for them. And, Lashley as well is a former Miami offensive coordinator. And I think what really makes the job that he's doing there so impressive was some of his previous stops. I wasn't really sure how well-rounded a Rhett Lashley offense was because at certain times when he was the coordinator at Miami, they struggled to run out of that shotgun. But Brashard Smith, another former Miami guy, a transfer there, has really fit like a glove, and they found so much out of him running the football this season. He's a former wide receiver who converted this year. And yet to pick up on where Kenton left off, Kevin Jennings at quarterback, I think it's been one of the better stories in the country for SMU because we were all so gung-ho preseason about Preston Stone, who entered the year as their starter. And credit to SMU for having one of the best plan Bs in the country. And we knew Kevin Jennings was a good quarterback. I don't think we imagined he would be as good as he was this year. We kind of saw him as more of a running quarterback with Preston Stone having the better arm. But Kevin Jennings has checked off all the boxes so far. And I'm not saying he's the best quarterback in the country or anything like that. He has some ups and downs. Penn State may be able to force him into making some mistakes, but Kevin Jennings has been one of the better stories in the country this year. And SMU, you mentioned, Zach, that you don't look at them as a normal converted G5 team. I mean, what a story, to make the jump from Group of 5 into Power 4 and have the type of immediate success that they had. They didn't win the ACC, but they did put together an impressive comeback bid against Clemson. It's been a really fun team to watch. And I know we'll talk about the environment they're stepping into. I'm a little less bullish on SMU actually winning this game than Kenton is, though, for reasons we will talk about.
Yeah, there's certainly the weather aspect of it, the travel. I will say this. If this was a neutral site game, I don't know that I would have as much confidence in a Penn State victory. I've gone on the record to say that Penn State will win 35-21. Kenton, that's probably going to, at least you're sitting there thinking it's definitely not going to be that. It's going to be a single score game, maybe even a field goal type of game. I don't see a lot of field goals being made when there's 15 mile an hour gusts of wind. So there's that portion of it too. But how close is this game, Kenton, before we take a break here? Because I think Penn State is going to be able to use, yes, the environment, use the stadium atmosphere, the travel aspect of it as well. Penn State has the additional week to prepare and get a little healthier here. I know that SMU, in terms of injury reports, is healthier. But why do they make this game closer? Because I look at the game against Clemson, and SMU doesn't go away, but they were also down 24-7 at one point in time. I think being on the road, that if that situation happens again, that's where Penn State can just say, all right, we're going to run the clock and it'll be over before you know it.
Let's make one thing clear. The ACC championship was, for all intents and purposes, an away game for SMU. The ACC championship game is in Charlotte. Anybody who knows anything about the geography of North Carolina will tell you Charlotte is one of the southernmost parts of North Carolina. In fact, it's a stretch. It's not everybody. Some people commute up from places like Rock Hill and whatnot to work in Charlotte. So that's how close you are in terms of talking about South Carolina to there, as opposed to Dallas to there. But why do I believe this game will be extremely close? For me, 8.5, give me SMU all day. Money line, I avoid it. And let me tell you why. These are my biggest reasons why. The health factor that you talked about. If Singleton were healthy all year, if he looked like, hey, and don't get me wrong, he had his best game of the season against Oregon last game. Am I right or am I wrong, Zach?
You're right. Absolutely.
He did. He looked phenomenal. I'm not arguing whether or not he has looked phenomenal in that game. I'm saying all season there have been the injury struggles and the nagging injuries. And as a guy that's played at the Division I level, I can tell you, those nagging injuries never quite go away until you get months to kind of, all right, let's settle this thing down. Number one. Number two, James Franklin is still your head coach. I'm sorry to say this. I know this is not fun to talk about, but James Franklin in big games, ladies and gentlemen, break out the Depends and the rubber sheets. Dono's got a little one, so he knows what I'm talking about. You got to get some potty training going, because that brother's going to wet the bed every single time in every single big game. And I know that Penn State fans are going to say, well, this ain't really a big game. We'll see. We'll see. And then this is my last and final reason of why I see this game being much closer than the odds makers are making it. With all due respect to Penn State, they have won some games that were like, hey, that's a good win against Illinois. No doubt about that. I give all the respect to Brett Bielema. I love what he does as a head coach. I think he's an instant floor raiser. Outside of that game, how many big games this year can you say Penn State impressed? Not just one, because keeping up ain't enough for me. I need to see you, hey, you won it and you impressed. Or, hell, we can even go just one. How many of those games can you say Penn State, this was a massive game and Penn State needed to show up, and they did in a meaningful way and won the football game? That's the biggest thing to me, because I don't have enough data on Rhett Lashley not showing up. And the reality of this team is simple. If SMU protects the ball, I've got SMU winning this game. However, if Carter and company can get home, if Reed on that back end for Penn State can pick a ball or two off, now we're looking at a different situation, because SMU has certain problems built in as well. They're a little undisciplined in terms of penalties. They're going to give you about a touchdown every game in terms of penalties. That's just who they are. But if they can protect the ball, I could easily see this being a win for SMU.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. And you can take a look maybe at some Thursday night football. The Chargers actually slight favorites tonight over the Broncos in LA. FanDuel has the Chargers laying 2.5. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The Oklahoma Sooners, they got their guy.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners.
John Mateer is an Oklahoma Sooner. Amidst much worry and consternation and Miami and apparently North Carolina, according to Toby Rowland, the Oklahoma Sooners got their guy. John Mateer is an Oklahoma Sooner.
I mean, I don't like taking victory laps, but I probably should take a victory lap here. I was trying to tell everybody to stay calm, that it was good. Now, granted, that story from Toby Rowland is very fascinating that he popped on there, that in addition to Miami, North Carolina and Bill Belichick got involved late in the John Mateer sweepstakes. And then Baker Mayfield had to be that dude because, of course, it's Baker Mayfield. And why would I say, of course, it's Baker Mayfield? That's who everybody is comparing John Mateer to. And I'm not going to say that you're wrong. I'm not going to say that you're right. I'm going to say we'll see. But the way that he plays the game, he plays a little dangerously, similar to what we've seen from a Baker Mayfield. But I'm just glad that this is over. John, we've been talking about this for 2 weeks. And I know everybody in the chat is probably tired, just worn out, dropping comments about it. People weren't very happy about yesterday's conversation. And it was mainly because, when is this dude going to get it over with? Well, we're not, and he's not on our timetable. We're on his. And he finally got into the portal over the weekend after he figured out and had some discussions. He flew in from Washington State, which is a cross-country flight. That's about 5 hours. He got him some rest, came late last night, today, and he got his visit in with potential, actually with 2 teammates. We'll talk about them in the next segment. But John, we've got potentially our quarterback for next season with Michael Hawkins, Jet New, and hopefully somebody else.
Yeah, it seems like this was the guy that was going to be the guy all along. And, just to revisit what he did in 2024, 64.6% completion percentage, 3,139 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 826 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns, averaged 4.6 yards per carry. Let's look at his big games against Texas Tech and Washington. Yes, the passing numbers against Tech are not great, 9 of 19 for 115 and a touchdown, but he did run for 197 yards in that game and another touchdown. Against Washington the next week, he completed 50% of his passes, but for 245 and a touchdown, ran for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns. So this is a legit dual threat quarterback, somebody who's going to be able to make plays both with his arm and with his legs. And I'm excited about it, man. I think that your quarterback situation is in a much better place. You've got a veteran, a guy that's played a year of college football. He's gone through some of the mental miscues that you go through as a first-year starter. And now you get to put a little bit better talent around him, a better offensive line, hopefully. Obviously, he's going to have a step up in competition in the SEC. But if he's the gamer that everybody says he is, and if he's as much a Baker Mayfield as everybody says he is, he'll be ready for the challenge.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. The performance he put together up at Washington State, we've seen that done in the SEC before. We've seen heck, go look at Peyton Thorne. He was putting up some running stats and stuff in games on a regular basis too. The only problem was he was making some decisions, or his coach was making decisions, or lack thereof. But that's not the point. John Mateer still has the opportunity to do that, but we'll see. The best part about having him, John, and this is my personal opinion, is that you now have a guy that knows the offense. He understands how everything should be ran, and he can help out everybody else on the staff, on the roster. Because now he can teach the wide receivers the plays. He can teach Michael Hawkins the plays. And that, to me, is the most important thing, is that we've got somebody that can help teach everybody and get everybody ramped up real fast.
It improves your team in a way that you needed to. I mean, going into this next season, you don't really have much margin for error. You've got to make a big jump. You can't have another 6-6 season. You can't. Nope. I think you got to go somewhere like 8-9, push for 10 wins next year to be considered a successful season.
Yeah.
I mean, you bring back a really good defense. The offense still is going to have question marks. It's going to have question marks all offseason because even though you've added a couple wide receivers that we'll talk about in the next segment, there's still going to be question marks surrounding that group, surrounding the offensive line, surrounding the running back room. And so you've solidified the quarterback position at the very least with John Mateer, Michael Hawkins, Jet New. You feel good about where you're at going into next year, regardless of who ends up being the starting quarterback. It's going to be John Mateer. Until something tells me otherwise, John Mateer is going to be the starting quarterback. He's not coming to Oklahoma to be a backup. Will there be competition? Probably, but he will be the starter. And listen, you get a veteran option, a guy that can win games both with his arm and his leg. I'm excited about this decision. And I think with Ben Arbuckle, a second year in Ben Arbuckle's system, that's going to make him even better.
Oh, yeah. A second year in the system, which actually technically his third year in the system because he was the backup to Cam Ward. So he's been there. So, yeah, and your point still stands. Multiple years in the same system, now with with probably a step up in talent, not probably – actually, no, yes, I will say that. A step up in talent, especially as we're bringing more people in here. All he needs to do is get out there and get the ball into these dudes' hands and let them work. That's the one thing that I'm really stoked about is we've got that solidified. And now, John, as we really focus on the portal and people can now commit, they know. Like, of course, there's questions behind Michael Hawkins. We've seen a little bit of him play. And so you're like, okay, he's not bad. He's young. We just need him to get better. Okay, that's going to happen. Well, from there, now they're looking back like, oh, I saw Mateer put up, 3,000 yards, put up 3,900 yards total with 3,100 being passed and like 800 rushing. He's a gamer. He's put up 44 touchdowns. Okay, he's going to find a way to get the ball into our hands. Awesome. Now you got guys jumping on board because they're excited that there's going to be a veteran player out there in the field. So I guess the big thing now to me is it's got to be a competition. That way, Michael Hawkins doesn't feel like he's being left out in the cold. He's got to be able to have the opportunity to compete. I guess now is how many wide receivers will we be trying to pick up from the portal going forward?
Well, I think you got to continue to add depth.
Yeah.
You've got some good young guys. You've added a couple guys that we're going to talk about here in the next segment, but you've got to add a bunch of competition to the wide receiver room just to see who's going to stand out and who's going to be a really good fit for Ben Arbuckle's system and then go from there. But when you look at Mateer, what is it that you like about his game?
I like the fact that he makes decisions. He make them quick. He can extend plays. And if he knows that he needs to tuck and run based upon what the defense is giving him, he'll tuck and run. That Washington game was very fascinating to watch him play. And he lit him up for 5 touchdowns. He was out there balling from passes to runs. He was very decisive, and he was putting a lot of strain on that Washington defense. Granted, it's not the same Washington defense that played in the national championship, but still a lot of really good players in that Big Ten team. They were out there dang near winning some games against some other ones in their conference. So there wasn't a bad team. He was out there cooking them. And that game to me was the one I was like, okay, yeah, I think he's a game changer.
And that's what I think too. I think he's got the big arm that's able to make the throws down the field to help stretch a defense. And he's willing to do it. He's not going to wait for a wide receiver to be 100% wide open before he throws the ball. He's going to throw it to a place where his wide receiver can go and make a play. And he's going to trust his wide receiver to make the play. So that's the thing you like about having a veteran quarterback, somebody who's played a little bit. And again, now going into year 3 of Ben Arbuckle's system, he's going to have a lot of confidence just to be able to get out there and sling it, which is something that was a bit of an issue in 2024 at the quarterback position with Jackson Arnold, just the unwillingness to throw the ball sometimes. Again, a lot of issues on offense for Oklahoma in 2024. Oklahoma's undergoing a big reset